It's God with us. So it's a dangerous concept when, especially when people who believe they are instructed by God have great military power. And the Nazis, with their military power and with that kind of divine ordination, we know what they did in Europe. And now you have the United States, and you have a government which assures us gets its power from God, and in the hands of the United States, this is a dangerous doctrine simply because of the great power of the United States to do whatever they think is God's will. That is a nation with 10,000 nuclear weapons, a nation with military bases in 100 different countries with warships on every sea. When you couple that power with the notion of divine sanction, then the world, is in danger. And this idea, you see, that the United States should use its power in the world, should revel in its being number one, became especially important at the end of World War II, because at the end of World War II, the United States did become the preeminent power in the world. Yes, there was the Soviet Union, but it was the United States that was, the greatest economic and with the atomic weapons, the greatest military power in the world. And at the end of World War II, Henry Luce, who is one of the, most important non-governmental people, one of the most powerful non-governmental people in the country, the owner of a vast chain of media enterprises, the man who owned time, life, and fortune. I mean, not just the magazines, but the things themselves. But Henry Luce said that this would be the American century. As he put it, the victory now at the end of World War II gave the United States the right to exert upon the world the full impact of our influence for such purposes as we see fit, and by such means as we see fit. And that idea that we do what we want, that this is the American century, that, in fact, persisted and was acted out through the rest of the 20th century, because the United States, continued to expand, even with the Soviet Union there and soon acquiring its own nuclear weapons. The United States continued to expand into its influence into the oil regions of the Middle East by this special arrangement with Saudi Arabia, into Asia with Japan and certainly into Latin America, and there were some setbacks. Setback in Vietnam, but the Philippines remained a very important base for the United States. And yes, and soon the United States had military bases all over the world, and soldiers and sailors stationed all over the world, and and the Cold War with the Soviet Union did not really do much to stop this expansion. In fact, the Cold War, the existence of the Soviet Union as a rival, the existence of something called a communist threat in the world, gave the United States a justification for doing so much of what it was doing in the world, for expanding its power in the world, for overthrowing this government or that government, or moving troops here and moving troops there, all justified by the necessity of stopping communism. Now you can see that, I think, historically, that this was an artificial justification. And by that I mean that this wasn't the real reason for American expansion in the world. The real reason for American expansion was not to stop communism. After all, that expansion was a continuation of expansion which had gone on for a long time. If you want to see the limits of that idea that it was the Soviet Union and the Cold War which was the reason for United States expanding its power in the world, all you have to do is ask the question, what was going on before 1917? What was going on before there was a Bolshevik Revolution? You mean at that point the United States was just minding its own business? No. Long before there's a Bolshevik Revolution, the United States was engaged in expanding its power into the Caribbean, into the Pacific. What happened, of course, is that the Cold War ended. That justification ended. But very soon after, 9/11 happened. And once 9/11 took place, another justification appeared. Terrorism replaced communism as a kind of simple answer to the question of, why are we going here? Why are we going there? Why are we making war here? Why are we sending troops there? And, in the 50s, why are we overthrowing the government of Guatemala, the government of Chile, or the government of Iran? Well, it's communism. And now it's terrorism. And it has a certain plausibility because there was a reality to communism. But what we did in relation to that reality went far beyond what the real threat was. There's a reality to terrorism, but what we do in relation to terrorism does not quite meet the requirement of having an effect, a serious effect on terrorism. And it does suggest that there are motives deeper than the idea of fighting terrorism for the American move into the Middle East in these past few years. So 1 year after 9/11, President Bush announces, the national security strategy, and this basically lays out the principles for American foreign policy, and lays out the principles of unilateralism, and the preemption, and making sure that no power can rival the power of the United States in the world. Essentially, this was a declaration that the United States could ignore the UN Charter, because if you accept preemption, then you are violating the principle of the UN Charter that you're only supposed to make war in self-defense, and I suggest to you also violating the principles laid down in the Nuremberg trials, for which the Nazi leaders were put on trial and hanged, and that is for aggressive war, for preemptive war, that is war not in self-defense. So this is a very serious thing, this declaration of principles in the national security strategy. And we shouldn't think it was just a Bush Republican idea. You know, very often we like to think that before Bush things were okay, and that Bush represents a dramatic departure from whatever we had before. But in fact, preemption is something that, after all, the United States has made war before, has invaded countries before, well, as we did in Southeast Asia, which was certainly not a matter of defending ourselves, you know. And the United States has made war unilaterally. This is before Bush, yeah, made war unilaterally or carried out bombing missions unilaterally. I mean, sometimes creating a kind of cloak of internationalism by bringing in NATO or by bringing in the UN, as in Korea, but basically an American enterprise. And in fact, under Clinton, Madeleine Albright said at one point, some of you may remember this, she said, you know, we will, if possible, we will act in the world multilaterally. But if necessary, we will act unilaterally. So, yeah, and you know, Clinton was not, you know, averse to acting unilaterally and preemptively. What happens in the present situation is that, I must say this, that very often liberals in the United States, people who are not for Bush, yes, liberals in the United States, accept with sort of qualifications here and there, but accept basically the Bush principles. And the reason for this, I think, is that 9/11 had a very powerful psychological effect on everybody in America. But I think there are many people in the United States, liberal intellectuals, who are really, I think, so affected emotionally by what happened on 9/11 that I think it began to distort their thinking. I know they wouldn't like me saying this. Distort their thinking about what was happening in the world and about America's role in the world. And they're sort of becoming hysterical over terrorism. And again, yes, there's a reality of terrorism, but there's a difference between dealing with terrorism in an intelligent and real way and becoming hysterical over terrorism in the way that actually liberals in the 1950s, and those of you who know some of the history of the United States in the 1950s during the Cold War period, during what is called the McCarthy period, you might remember that there were not just McCarthy people, but liberal people, Democrats, who reacted hysterically to what they considered the communist threat. I mean, to the point where Hubert Humphrey, who was a sort of a quintessential American political liberal, Hubert Humphrey suggested the notion of internment camps for dangerous people in the United States in times of crisis. And I think we're seeing, you know, something of the same phenomenon. Because I was reading in the liberal magazine, the American Prospect, with the editors in their recent issue, they're the premise is